go. Welcome, everybody, to another wonderful day and another wonderful podcast with another wonderful mystery woman, because I do not have a clue what she does, how she does it, and her backstory. So I'm in the dark as always, so we will have a wonderful conversation just to find out what her story is all about. So I'm going to try and pronounce her name. I'm going to close my eyes while I do, and it's Mujesira. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Oh my God. You know, listeners, I'm terrible with names, so I've done it. So, Mujesira, will you let us know what you do for business to help people successfully, and then we'll go with the flow.
Sure. As I said, Mujesira, I am a director of digital strategy for Capgemini. I actually work directly with the world's largest financial institutions to help them think through how to best serve their clients. So that's really it.
Okay, so from what point of view do you do that? So how would you help your clients? What technologies would you use, or in what way it would be the outcome when you're helping their clients? Be a bit more specific.
Sure thing. So, I mean, my focus is really from the marketing angle. And so, as we look at the changing world of technology, AI, data, all of that that's happening today, how can large financial institutions that have to navigate things like regulatory compliance, as well as changing consumer behavior, as well as the changing nature of what wealth looks like today, best communicate with their clients, whether it's new services, new products, or just adding different solutions to the portfolio of what they're doing for them today. And so it takes, it looks different from every client that I work with, because ultimately their organizations are very different. And the benefit of, I would say, the way I approach problem solving is that I'm a firm believer that you should kind of choose a lane, know what you're good at and do that very well. And so the path of discovering that for each one of my clients is different. And so rather than having the answer, I would say that what I do with clients is work through with them on discovering what their each unique answer is to a problem, because there shouldn't be one, like how you should use AI to personalize for clients for one financial institution should look very different from another, because ultimately the goal of what you're trying to achieve should be different from organization to organization. If it isn't, you're going to end up kind of saying the same thing and recycling the same type of messaging constantly. So really trying to work with folks to kind of sift through the noise, get into the idea of like what makes you different, or in a world of a lot of noise, if you're trying to create a path of diversity, like where can we kind of find that road that can set you apart from others.
Okay. So basically you reverse engineer exactly what they need. So you start from their end and then you work backwards to find out exactly what their needs are, because it's much easier to do that than the other way around. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, in some ways. And so when we think about, I mean, a lot of what I do does have layers of technology and AI and data embedded in it. However, to me, all of those things should actually just be an enabler to bring to life a vision that we got to from what you were just saying. Is kind of working backwards of where do we want to get to? Like, what is the kind of world that we are trying to create between ourselves and our clients? And then we should only be using these tools as a way to get there, rather than as a way to paint the picture.
Mm. Listeners, I'll break it down for you. This is a highly intelligent lady, so you're probably sitting there thinking, I do not understand what she's saying. Um, Basically, what it is a situation where she finds out exactly what their needs are, but their needs, because they're such a large company, they're quite complex and unique in every single way because the institutions are quite complex in their ways. So finding the goals, what's needed, and you work backwards because that's the only way to decipher exactly what is needed. And and this skill set that you have, how did you come about it? Because it's not quite straightforward. It's quite complex. Your brain works in such a way where you naturally can solve patterns. Do you see what I mean? Because
Sure.
with what you do is not, it's simple to you because you literally look at a situation and you just happen to see the pattern and the issues. Is that correct?
Um, I mean, I wouldn't say it's as quick as that.
Mm,
And so one of the things that I would say is, as much as my superpower is to be able to discover patterns and to be able to not just patterns, kind of be able to see processes and flows from a big
mm,
picture standpoint.
mm,
I think my bigger superpower is to be able to know when I don't have enough information to see that. And so why I kind of immediately say that what I do is not give generic answers of this is the truth and this is how you should do things and this
mm-hmm,
is the right thing to do, is because what what I need to be able to come up with what you're saying
mm,
sets me apart
mm-hmm,
is dig. I need to go in and have conversations in a very open way where it is what casual and goal oriented, but to be able to really hear different perspectives
mm-hmm,
in a single team of three people, even
mm,
to as big of a team as 300, as you can imagine.
mm-hmm.
Everybody's going to think differently.
Yes.
When we ask them what are we working towards,
Uh-huh.
whether that's a team of three or 300, the answer is going to be totally different. And so being able to talk to all of the different individuals on how they perceive the goals and how they perceive the challenges to getting
Uh-huh.
those goals
Mm.
allows my brain to actually like notice patterns and the red flags
Yes. Yeah,
and
yeah.
where are we constantly hitting up against the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Pull out some of those common goals that we see across the board and kind of try to see them as the thing that we can create some commonality as far as working
Yeah.
towards.
Yeah, I get it.
um, but I would always try to like the thing that most people want to talk about. The interesting part is the my brain can really zoom out and see the big picture.
Mm-hmm.
But in order for me to do that effectively, the much better part or the more important part of this process is that idea of like, hey, let's pause, let's zoom in real quick. Let's
Mm-hmm.
do a lot of zooming in before we come to zoom out and try to connect the data points. I think far too often people actually are
Mm.
caught up on the idea of having the right answer
Mm-hmm.
and, showing that they know what they're talking about. And they'll miss a lot of these like unique data sets in between the conversations. And for me, it's always that's the part that like I get very activated about. It's like, okay, we're trying to do something. How does success look like? What are the different
Mm.
systems that we need to have in place in order to get to that ultimate goal?
Mm-hmm.
And how many of those systems actually exist and don't exist, like, and thinking through that stuff. To me, I mean, just this morning I was talking to some of the people on my team where I said like, hey, if you really want to know what you've got going on here, go through this plan and don't worry about the fact that as you try to fill in the boxes, there's going to be boxes missing and there's
Mm-hmm.
going to be things that we don't have. That's actually some of the most important work that you can do is to know what you don't know that you need to know, what you don't have that you need to have. And so
mm,
walking my teams through that idea of like, don't be afraid to point out that something's off. Go through the process to know, like, oh, actually, to have an answer for you, we need to know these pieces, and
mm,
right
mm,
now we
mm,
don't. And that is, like, I would say that that's one of the biggest things that I try to help my teams and my clients do, is
mm,
identify where those like gaps to success are.
I yeah, totally understand. I want to find out exactly where you come from the point of view. I know you're ADHD, is that correct?
Yes.
Um, you're quite hypersensitive. You think very, very fast, and you slow down very, very fast. Because for you to be able to zoom in and zoom out, there has to be a form of being able to control the speed in which you think. Is that correct?
Yeah, a
Yeah,
lot.
and I totally understand that, because there are times when I feel overwhelmed when people aren't moving fast enough, and my brain is going 10 noughts, as my mother would say, 10 noughts to the dozen. But
Mhm.
then when you're talking about when you have to zoom out and you have to fill the gaps, you have to slow down to be able to analyze what you have in front of you. So I
Mhm.
get that. So let's talk about the ADHD. How far, with hindsight that you have now, how far does this go back with your ADHD? And what does your ADHD look like as far back as you can go?
Mm,
You've got hindsight because you didn't know at the time, right?
yeah,
But now you have
absolutely.
hindsight and you can now look back and thought, oh, that makes sense. Now you found out you've
Yeah.
got ADHD.
So I had the unique experience of having my like childhood and adolescence be, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, happen in two different cultures.
Mm.
So I did all of my elementary schooling in Bosnia, and then for middle school and high school is when we moved to United States.
Uh-huh.
And so, first of all, I'll point out that especially at that time, I mean, I'm sure now it's different. The concept of ADHD did not exist in Bosnia. And even in America at that time, the concept of ADHD in young girls did not exist
Mm.
at the time. And so, that's something to be, that's a much more complicated topic. Some
Mm-hmm.
of the probably trauma and the unworking of
Mm-hmm.
ADHD and being misunderstood amongst young women, and
Okay.
how we've had to kind of peel back the layers on our own,
Mm.
as we've navigated professional
Mm.
life, especially.
Yes.
But for me in Bosnia, I was always, there's people say it a lot with autism, actually, of you meet one person with autism and you've met one person with autism. And so
Mm-hmm.
that idea, but I actually think with a lot of neurodivergent minds, I feel the same way with ADHD.
Mm.
Is I've met people that I relate to on certain things, but I've
Mm-hmm.
also, because I like found that those are the people I relate to the least on so many things, like where
Mm.
we meet in the middle in some, but then we're so far apart on how our ADHD shows up in us. So for me, I was one of those ADHD people that actually didn't struggle with studying.
Mm.
I very much so would consume data in
Mm-hmm.
such a fast
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
pace
Yeah.
that, if anything, what I would hit up against the wall in schools was that my learning process was so fast that I could memorize things at such a
Mm.
uh, speed that it would constantly make me be ahead of the other students, but
Okay.
also kind of be a nuisance to the teaching process. And so in Bosnia, some of the culture around how you handled what would be considered highly gifted kids or
Mm-hmm.
kids that didn't act out, that
Mm-hmm.
acted out in certain ways, like in America, it might have been seen a little abusive or very outside the norm. But I reflect, you talk about hindsight, and I'm like, oh my God, they were geniuses. So what my teacher would do when she would realize, like, one, I would raise my hand, but by the time I raised my hand, I was saying the answer.
Yeah.
So that in itself. But what she would do is she would send me to stare at the wall for
Really?
20 minutes. She would take my chair. She'd be like, okay, Mujesira, now it's your time to like go take 5 minutes in a corner. And
Hold
had
on.
I known
Sorry.
now,
Is this because you put up your hands to answer a question?
well, no, see, like that's your, I can already tell you grew up in like a Western place where you're like, oh my God, that sounds so mean. It was like one, I would put up my hand, but I would also say the answers before she would really call on me.
Ah, I
But
see.
she could
I see.
just tell that I was really excited to
Yeah.
show that I knew things.
Yeah.
I
Okay,
was
I get that.
really excited
Yeah,
to like point out how I had connected the dots and
I
like,
get that.
here's
So
all of the things
in
I
that
learned.
context, I
Yeah, it
understand
was
why.
getting in the way of the
Yeah,
other kids having a chance. And
that's
this is
right.
something that like I now use
Hmm.
significantly professionally, but that like I'm very aware now that when I'm feeling overstimulated,
Hmm.
what I need is a white wall. Like, it actually really does help to like maybe close my eyes for a second, breathe, have the brain like calm down a bit in
Hmm.
order to see things in a less heightened way with less
Hmm.
speed to what you were saying earlier.
Hmm.
So it said like they were these like old school Eastern European women, but they always like made sure that that wasn't seen as a punishment, that
Okay.
they constantly made sure I knew that I was gifted. They
Hmm.
constantly made sure that I knew that I was highly intelligent and
Hmm.
that all of these were tools in a way that they were using to either help the other students or
Okay.
to just give me a break. So it wasn't always like the most like politically correct explanation for things. But then I'll put it on the other hand, when I came to America, I
Okay.
found that what the teachers were significantly reacting to as a young girl was my lack of being able to fit in a box, my lack of behaving according to like the way a little girl is supposed to behave. They were
Hmm.
reacting towards that a lot more than they were
Hmm.
reacting to the idea that my average grade was 105 in every class. Like I was almost like it took a long time for teachers to actually identify me as a gifted student and put me in advanced classes. Took
Okay.
years, despite that I was constantly getting hundreds on
Yeah, that's
every.
what I don't understand.
Yeah,
I don't understand why it took so long when you obviously showing that you had a gift and you knew the questions before even knew the answer before the question had even finished being asked.
yeah.
To me, that sounds like a gift.
I know. This is different people will have different opinions. I do think in certain ways,
Hmm.
things are changing and times are getting better. But I do think at that time, Western civilizations, as much as they think that they are very liberal, I think in a way really had the most puritanical ways of like especially looking at young girls, where the idea of like boys painting outside the lines or misbehaving, and that could be looked at in more complex ways, such as neurodivergence or all of these things. Like a
Hmm.
girl that couldn't sit still was bad. Like a girl that talked back and couldn't like hold her tongue was. So I really, in America, was the first time that I really had my ADHD or my neurodivergency like create a lack of confidence for me. Where in
Hmm.
Bosnia, it was the thing that was really presented to me as my, we didn't have the word for it, but that idea that you're different and that's special and you're just built differently and don't lose it. Like I had things like that constantly kind of presented to me, where in America, I feel like the thing I was constantly being reacted to is like, you need to calm down.
Oh.
Like,
So you felt, so you felt in Bosnia that you could express yourself, you could be yourself more so than when you got to America, then it was a different thing altogether. Would that be correct in saying?
in nuance, everything has nuance.
Mm-hmm.
In the space of highly intelligent,
Mm-hmm.
neurodivergent mode. So in Bosnia, I felt like when it came to the only thing that teachers needed to really know about me, or like
Mm-hmm.
that they paid the most attention to, were my grades,
Okay.
was my ability to consume information and to learn.
Uh-huh.
And I felt that because of whatever cultural things were kind of imposed in America on majority of the teachers there too. And keep in mind, I grew up, I was in school in a very, what would be considered a southern city, much more conservative. And so some of those behavior traits that might be looked at as old-fashioned southern, at
Mm-hmm.
the end of the day, a lot of my teachers were those people. And
Mm-hmm.
so we don't talk enough how children do end up kind of consuming the cultures of their teachers during that time. And
Mm-hmm.
I think they just had a hard time with somebody like me. And then I'm an immigrant on top of it, so there's difference in just the cultural alignment in general.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I just constantly got like negative feedback.
Okay.
And so that's where I really struggled. Like, I think I would say my adolescence was the time where I almost like kind of put my hands up and was like, you know what, if nobody's going to like realize how brilliant I am, what's the point? Like, so
Mm.
I kind of like, that's where I started acting out more, kind of. I mean, I never stopped studying because I was always like an obsessive reader, but
Mm-hmm.
rather than reading things necessarily that were needed for school, I would just read whatever I wanted to. I would read 5 novels a week, but it wasn't necessarily the books that I needed to read for school.
Mm. Can I just stop you there? Let me just
Yeah.
ask you, it, you were very gifted, as we already know. You like reading, you're very good at maths and everything else. Um, did you see it, other than the situation that the teachers would stop you, constantly because wanted to give the kids, a chance, but did you ever see it as a problem that you had issues and so on and so forth at the time or while growing up? You obviously knew you were different because you were highly intelligent, but did you see it as, I have a problem, I have an illness, how did you feel at the time?
So not in my early years. I think
Hmm.
later on in my adolescent years, when I kind of say where, and this is all hindsight 2020, I could be
Hmm.
connecting dots that
Hmm.
maybe are not really there, because that's the
Hmm.
other thing that I think sometimes in our quest to make sense, our brains will look for patterns
Yeah.
sometimes, and we have to be cognizant of that as well. But I think that I really acted out a lot between like the ages of 16 to 24. Just whether it was dangerous behaviors or just constantly putting myself in situations that were probably not the best for me, impulsive behaviors. And I think some of that could be directed at the idea that I felt like I didn't have an outlet to put all of this energy
Yeah.
into.
Mm.
Where I said when I was younger and I was constantly being like, not only was I looked at as gifted, if they thought I was above the grade that I was in right then and there, they would constantly put me in, like, they would give me side projects. They would just add things on my plate to keep my brain busy. In the States, I didn't have one, I didn't know how to navigate the system that same way. So I feel like I just wasn't challenged enough.
Mm.
And that
Mm.
absence of a challenge, which
I suppose
let's, yeah.
also you wanted to be seen too.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
as much as you were, as much as you were seen because you always had your hand up or you always wanted to interrupt because you wanted to move forward, but you wasn't heard. You wasn't seen, you wasn't heard constantly over and over again. So you acting out and all those other things, you wanted to be heard as a child. And did you have this situation not only from a schooling point of view, did you have this situation in your environment from home with your peers, etc.? Was there a constant pattern of this beyond the schooling situation? How did your parents see you?
I mean, yes and no. So like that's where I say I have a lot of these conversations with other
Hmm.
neurodivergent folks, and there will be certain things that come up that I relate to, and then other things that come up that I'm like, honestly, no.
Hmm.
Like for me, I was a middle child, and uh probably because the teachers did give me a lot of praise, but
Hmm.
also I'm a very eccentric person. I was always like an outgoing kid, always kind of making fun of everything. I was seen enough. If anything, I was always trying to find ways to not be seen. I was always like kind of like thinking that because I'm all over the place, that everybody else is all over the place, so I
Yeah.
could get away with things. And I was terrible at getting away with things. I was always seen. Like, so maybe I thought I wasn't seen, and maybe that's, but it wasn't my reality. If anything, I felt
Hmm.
like
Well, I'll
maybe I
tell you.
could get lost in the hustle and
I
bustle.
get
And
you, I get you, but I tell you what it is. Now that's another dimension to you. So your general personality is that you're quite playful, you're quite loving, you're quite energetic. But when it came to expressing yourself through education, intelligence, etc., you weren't allowed to breathe when it came to that situation. You had all this built up energy when it comes to intelligence, but you weren't allowed to breathe. Outside of that, you was a loving kid. You had loads of energy. I don't know, how was you popular? Did the kids find you popular, easy going when it came to outside of the classroom? Because you said you're quite expressive too. I take it you was
yeah,
quite an expressive person. So
yeah,
how did they find you, as in a one-to-one, forget the education, just
yeah.
chilling out with this beautiful girl, very expressive? How did they find you? How
And
did they
who's they in this
communicate with you?
question? My parents or
No, not your parents. Let's talk about the kids, because obviously your peers and whatever. So you're now talking about your outgoing and
Mhm.
etc. We're out of the classroom, you're in the playground, you're at the house, whatever. How
Mhm.
did they react with you then? How did they find you?
I think it's so interesting to like answer these questions because you have to remind yourself of
Mm,
Kamala
mhm,
Harris's recent quote of "We're not aspiring to be humble," but um, I'm like a very good one-on-one person. And so
mhm,
I think that the difference between me in a group setting where especially like surrounded by different topics where
yes,
I can't wait to express myself
mhm,
and say what I need to say, and I'm so activated by so many things happening around me. When I'm one-to-one with human beings, and I think that's part of the reason why just about every relationship I've had in my life since
mm,
like the first friend I've ever had is
mhm.
still in my life today.
Great.
Those engagements when I'm able to like be just with you because I'm a person that gets so deep into any topic, I'm able to
Mhm,
get so deep into you.
mm,
And I care
mm,
so much, and I'm like, oh my God, tell me everything. And so that fascination with the world now becomes my fascination with you.
mm.
And so I'm very, I think
Curious.
for a long time, yeah, but there's also the idea that um, I was a safe place for a lot of like you bring up was I popular? I was not popular at all in America, but what
Mm,
I was, which was a very like unique role to play, and me, I'm one of like the most popular girls in my high school, are to this day very close
Uh-huh.
friends, and she's another ADHD friend that we speak on this topic. But I
Okay.
was this like secret friend for so many popular kids.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was like the person that they would like tell everything to, that nobody knew they were even friends with. Like
Mm,
it was like these we and I had a decent amount of relationships like that, where it was like this like secret like bonding relationship where I could hold space for people to just say whatever they wanted with no judgment, because to the point that you say, probably because of my curious nature.
so yeah, exactly. You've got a huge amount of curiosity, and it's the same as me. Hence why I can have a conversation. Remember, I was saying I know nothing about you. I just have a conversation because I'm a very curious person, and that's why I can have that conversation. I'm always interested in how the mind goes. I'm always quite deep in the person. I get you. I totally get you.
Yeah.
Um, and that's great that you still got friends from way back in the days. It's the same with me. Friendships are very important because we do get deep and they appreciate that, right? Um,
Mhm.
but what made you, because it sounds like you had a lot going on. I don't understand what made you seek out to find out if you was ADHD.
Um, I never really even felt the need to seek out to find out if I was ADHD. I feel like the second that there was words for it, I knew I was ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
I saw for a portion in my life, there was a moment for the first time ever that I felt like I needed to treat my ADHD. And so when I was about like 26, 27, I had gone through something very traumatic that had
Mm,
kind of turned my life in a place where, as you can imagine, the passion I have for any topic, then when the topic
yeah,
goes so deep inward,
yeah.
it was the first time in my life that I couldn't kind of come out, that
Mm.
zooming
You
in and
couldn't
then
express
zooming
yourself.
out.
Mm,
Well, I couldn't come out of the hole.
mm,
The
mm,
hole
mm.
was so deep that I like every time, I just couldn't come out of it.
Yeah.
And I
Mm.
couldn't do the other things in my life that needed my focus and that needed my attention. It was the topic that was overwhelming.
Can I
And
ask what that was that tipped you over the edge?
not, no, I'm not comfortable with sharing that, but it was a personal trauma.
Mm,
And so the idea of needing to do other things while managing such a intense emotional connection to another topic
mm,
was the first time where I was like, I can't do this. I'm gonna need to like go get something. And and I'm still not quite sure how I feel about things like Adderall or things like that. Like that relationship for me has been one that is a journey. Not I don't judge anybody, but I do think back on me as a little girl, and I do have this like heartbreak that I feel
mm-hmm.
imagining that there's other little girls like me out there that are on Adderall.
Okay.
That breaks my heart. Like, it's one thing to like be on these substances as an adult where your personality and the way you look at the world is already developed and your creativity. Being able to spend my whole life without those things and being
Mm-hmm.
very ADHD, and then to also experience myself on those supplements,
Mm-hmm.
to me, it is a different person.
Mm,
And some of those superpowers that I talk about, they are definitely subdued a bit.
mm, mm.
Um, and so, as I said, not against it, but I do think that there's a cost to everything,
Yeah.
and there's definitely a. So I didn't seek out identification, and it was one of those really funny stories I tell actually of when I went to my appointment to like be
Mm.
diagnosed for ADHD, I was late. I came in, I started telling the woman a story. My alarm had gone off, and I had like set my head of like, okay, I have 5 minutes, and those 5 minutes, I forgot about the 5 minutes, and then I came there, and so she was just like, here you go. But um, yeah, so I went there with the idea that knowing I'll pass any diagnosis with flying colors, that kind of deal. And from, I don't know enough about how they read those things, but apparently, out of the 10 scenarios, I tested like on a 9 out of 10 intensity.
Okay.
um,
So
so,
hold on,
yeah.
let me just stop you there. So you went through this great trauma, and so you needed to get help on that trauma because you couldn't get yourself out of the big hole, so to speak. So you went to get some help, and just put me, if I'm wrong, then let me know. You went to get the help, not specifically for ADHD, but you needed some help anyway to understand why you can do what you usually can do. And when you got that help, was it that person that tried to help you thought you may have ADHD? It wasn't you. Someone suggested. How did that
It
come
was just
about?
me. So I went to an ADHD specialist as a first step. Yeah. So
Right.
as I said, I mean, the good bad thing is that it is a topic that's out there a lot.
Mhm.
Anytime a topic comes my way, I consume it a lot. So there's a lot of things. And then also I'm around a lot of neurodivergent people that would constantly tell me how I'm off the charts.
Yeah.
So there was things that
That pointed
uh,
to you
that
maybe having
pointed
ADHD. Yeah.
but also then the concept of I always knew my brain. It's not that I don't like the word not normal, but yeah, the way my mind worked was different.
Mm.
And that in America, there's a name for everything where the mind works different. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, I knew that for this portion of the time, based on what I was going through in my career, and I needed to prioritize that, I was like, okay, I'm really going to need help focusing on this. And then it was always with the goal in mind to get off of
Yeah.
the help. But it was about I'm going to get help with the focus,
Yeah.
not so much, I think, just to correct, I'm going to get help with the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And through that help, I discovered that I'm ADHD. I knew I was ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
just
Mm-hmm.
was one of those kind of almost like rebellion people where I was like, I don't need help. And I still am a little bit of that person of like, this is my superpower. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I've avoided certain careers that I probably would have been great in because I'm ADHD, because I know if somebody needed from me to be on at 7 a.m. up until 7 p.m., working in very structured, defined ways,
Mm-hmm.
that probably wouldn't be for me. Like I knew
Mm.
that from a long time ago. And so being able to have space for creativity, being able to have space for uh,
Flexibility.
flexibility,
Mm.
exactly, was always very important to me. And so I had kind of been like a road warrior from a
Mm.
young age of like,
Mm.
know your brain and know just because you might be good at
Mm.
something does not mean that you make sense within the construct of those career
Mm.
choices,
Yeah.
of certain things like that.
No, I totally understand what you're saying. It's I'm the same way. To have rigidity is not a good thing for me at all. I need dynamics within my life. Otherwise, it's a big problem. God, your brain is amazing. It works amazingly fast, and I can see that. That. How did your relationships, romantic relationships, that must have been hard for men, because a lot of men like to be in control of a relationship. And you're the kind of person, you know what you want, when you want it, and you're fast paced. I know a lot of men can't handle that. So how
Honestly, I
so
love this.
how did it go with you then?
Um, I have not had really any bad relationships with men.
Good,
And
good.
I say that, and I think my neurodivergence, my intelligence, whatever we want to call it, was part of that experience. And so one of the things I've been super passionate about when I speak to other women about is this idea that no, men are not a certain type of way. You are playing into stereotypes of what you're expecting from men and delivering them a product that looks like what you think that they want to see. And therefore you're getting the stereotype back. And
Yeah.
like, I've had zero choice but to be authentic. If I tried to like
Yeah.
put myself in a certain mold, it wasn't gonna work.
Yeah.
And so the type of people that a person like me attracted
Yeah.
were all incredible.
Yeah, no,
Um,
and I
yeah,
totally
so right
understand that
away,
because you was yourself, and because you was
exactly.
yourself, you didn't hide yourself. You put a lot of people off, thinking, "Oh no, she's just too much." But the people that like you, oh yeah, I can get into this.
My
Start instead of you
God.
trying to be somebody else and pretend to be someone else. You know what it's like when you try to be good, and then a few
Mhm.
months later, you're then someone completely different.
But
And
that's the
because you
thing,
was
like,
authentic,
and so that's kind of the advice that I give to people all the time. Yeah, I'm happily married right now, and I know that for my husband, it is it's not that it's an easy road. He definitely has things that he has to maneuver with
mm,
a person that's as intense as me. But I think in some ways, all of us are
yes,
built differently. So
of
I
course,
have a lot of things I got to maneuver about him as
without
well.
a doubt.
But I think whether it's my ADHD or my personality or whatever, one of the big things I would always tell people is like, be honest right away, because you might as well close that door
Yeah,
faster. Like, what are you prolonging? Like,
exactly.
what is the end goal in hiding the truth when the truth is what you're trying to connect on?
Mm,
Like, and so even going back to the original conversation about work, I approach things the same way. It's like, get your cards on the table so that we know what we're dealing with here. Like, what's the point of, like, if you are a certain kind of way, why would you want somebody to meet you in any other form or fashion when
mm,
that's eventually who you're trying to have be loved?
mm,
Like, so if you're ready for marriage, if you want kids, like, I'm in my 30s, and a lot of my single female friends will like say things about like, oh, these, you don't want to put men off with this. I'm like, yes, you do. Like, I love putting people off. Like, get them out.
yeah,
Filter through
totally.
faster.
Yeah.
Like, why? And so people would think that I had this like negative experience, and I've gotten that a lot of like, oh, men must have had a hard time. And I'm like, honestly, I filtered all of those men out real quick. Nobody was coming to try to like hit
Mm,
on me that was expecting something that
mm,
was not this.
yeah.
So it really, like, a lot of the experiences that I knew of my other friends having, I frankly didn't have to deal with, and I'm super thankful. And
Mm,
I reflect on majority of my relationships in a super positive way, and it's a really great scenario when I see exes that are with people today that I know that that woman's got a good one, kind of deal. Like, I don't have to worry
yeah.
about something like that.
No, totally. And you've done the right thing. And I take it you've always been like that from way back in the days, being authentic, accepting yourself. You are who you are, kind of attitude. How long have you been like that? Or did you have to go through a transformation before you became as you were right now, with being authentic, happy with yourself? I am who I am, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, authenticity was probably always at the core of like how I've known how to express myself.
Mm,
But the idea of confidence, I mean, I think confidence for all of us is a journey. And I say that, as many female friends as I have, that's the other thing I think maybe my ADHD actually helped me with. I have a lot of male friends, a lot of very close, deep relationships with men and women. And what I've learned through those relationships is we're all basically the same. I don't think there's that many differences. So the confidence piece in all of us, men, women, it's a journey. Like, we're all kind of, something can throw us forward as much as some us throw us backwards as much as something can propel us forward. So I'm not going to say I've always been confident, or
mm,
I always am confident. Like,
mhm.
I'm also a vulnerable person
Yeah.
that can go into her head,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't exist there as a default.
Yeah.
My default is being okay with myself and loving myself. And I think that even though I go on those journeys where I might be set back a little bit, my goal is always to get to a place of this is who I am, and
Mm-hmm.
so this is who I'm gonna be my whole life, and I have to find a way to nurture this relationship because it's here to stay.
Yeah.
The relation. So my goal is always to find a way to love me again,
Yeah.
no matter. And as I said, my whole life I have slipped, and I know my whole life I will slip from that love. But I'm always trying to get back to it. I'm
Mm-hmm.
always trying to find a way to love me again.
Mm-hmm. No, that's quite powerful. I must admit, you've got a beautiful story, quite an unusual one, to be honest, but a very strong one to know your strength and how positive you are. Obviously, you've gone through your falls and your ups and downs, but you've got an amazing mind, the way it works. And it obviously works for you for your business, being able to navigate in such a way to be so dynamic in the way you work to help your clients. And obviously, your clients see your superpower and the way you can work so fast. So, how long have you been working in this capacity with the work you're doing now? When did that take shape?
I mean, I've been with my company currently 3 years, but I've been in, B2B sales, technology space for basically my whole career since I was
Okay.
21. So the last 15 years.
Wow.
Is
Uh,
that,
So what made you go down the sales tech space?
you know, hindsight, I met somebody that is still in my life, one of my mentors that I could relate to, that I could
Mm-hmm.
like see myself through him.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm one of those people that like paints a life in her head, and so if
Uh-huh.
I can create an image, I'll kind of follow through it. And so
Uh-huh.
I think that I just met some people when I was in college that I was like, oh, I can do what he's doing. And so it kind of started like that. And a lot of my, I would say, behaviors and successes have been through the lens of I made a story in my head and then I acted it out in real life. And I remind myself of that sometimes right now. I was recently having this conversation where, a couple
Mm-hmm.
of years ago, I finished NYU. I did my MBA at NYU. And,
Okay.
right now I am in marketing strategy for large companies. And I know at some point I
Mm-hmm.
said each one of those things as a teenager, like from literally NYU being like a dream school that I had like put in my head that I would like imagine yeah, to like, oh, what would be cool, like is to do this, this and that. But somehow like I speak them into existence. Dave Chappelle, I love dearly, and he has this thing where he once does like a skit of like, I'm a really powerful dreamer. I
Yes.
feel that way. My husband and I like talk about that. And so when we have anything that we want to do, we'll keep talking about it because it'll eventually get done just by, and I'm not like saying, oh, speak something into existence, but in a way, by speaking something out loud,
Uh-huh.
it creates a feedback loop and a focus for me,
Mm-hmm.
and a certain level of accountability. And so something that I don't think we talk enough about, you mentioned you couldn't do with rigidity. You
Yes.
need flexibility. I
Mm.
do too. But what I've also learned that I need in my career and what I try to communicate with any managers that I have, which I
Uh-huh.
oftentimes didn't get, is I actually need some micromanagement. I need some deadlines. I need some task oriented work. If you
Okay.
want something from me, even if you don't say it yourself, I'm going to say nowadays, okay, I'll get that to you by 5 p.m.
Okay.
Because if I need to create some guardrails for myself. The
Mm-hmm.
idea of totally like painting with no lines, that's not the most productive
Uh-huh.
always mode for me.
So you need accountability straight off to be able to be how can I say productive.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I know it's yeah, oh my
Because
God.
I could live in my head for days.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So can I. No, I get, I get you. I need accountability too. Otherwise, I'm all over the place. So I do get you for sure, and it's just not easy for us. But you do corporate, but do you work one to one with people? So your own type of clients, etc. What's I know you said you work for big teams. That's fine.
Mhm.
But what other things do you work in the business area? Do you do the one to ones? Do you and you were saying that you also a speaker? Is that correct?
I mean, I have, depending on different topics, I've been looked at as a subject matter expert in certain things.
Mhm,
I do a lot of within my company itself. I'll do a lot of leadership training and
mhm,
storytelling workshops and things of that nature, personal branding, mentorship. So from like a one-to-one standpoint, I do a lot of that. I've led teams, so obviously there's the management layer there
mhm.
on the one-to-one relationships. But currently I'm not working for myself outside of my company. If
Okay.
like I don't have any of my own clients.
Hmm. Okay, that's really interesting. So you work for the company, you work for big companies. Do you work for smaller businesses, or is it just the big ones?
Back in the day I did. So I mean, in a way, my career has kind of mimicked a journey where my career growth has kind of been directly correlated with the size of companies I work
Mm,
with. So at the early stages of my career, yeah, I've worked with some smaller businesses and nonprofits. Today, I am so far removed from that. I'm actually like literally working with just like the top 50 banks in the world. So nothing that would be really reflective of that. But with that said, I think what I'm doing and what is my goal to do is actually work with these institutions in a way that establishes reliable and trustworthy one-to-one relationships, whether that is with small businesses
mhm,
and or individuals. And I think a lot of my relationship with the world makes me an
uh-huh.
ideal person to be able to like help them navigate that journey um, in a
Okay.
human way.
Okay, well, listen, unfortunately, we're coming up to an hour. That time has gone so fast. You are fascinating. Thank you for your time for sure. Um, can I ask you, how can people get in touch with you if they need to engage with you, ask you more questions, etc.? How would they go about that?
I mean, one, I feel like we could have so many more conversations on this
No,
topic,
I know,
so we can definitely
I
do that
feel it.
as well. Because I'm actually off of most social media for reasons that are connected to
Mhm.
being a neurodivergent person. But I'm on LinkedIn, and so Mujesira Dudic. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can follow me. I am pretty responsive to messages there. Um, so I would say that's probably the best way to get in touch with me.
Okay, and listeners, as always, I'll have the link below so you can copy and paste and click away to your heart's content. And as you can see, this is one higher, let me say again, high-wired lady that knows exactly what she wants, knows exactly what to do. As you can see, she has an amazing brain and she'll always get the job done, as you can see. And you can see why, can't you? What a genius we have with us today. And thank God she's on here just to show you can be ADHD and you can be successful, like with all the other ladies and gentlemen that have been with us. You can be autistic, AD, and anything else, any neurodivergence. It just comes down to focusing on what you're good at and using that as your power, just like anybody else. You don't even have to be neurodivergent. You just
Mhm.
find out what you're exactly good at. We have
Mhm.
bad days like everybody else. You're probably in a hole right now. It is okay to be in a hole because we have it every other day ourselves. The point is to be consistent, focus on your strengths, and we can go forward. Thank you once again for being on the show with us again, and we do appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
In the meantime, sayonara, everybody.